Okay, so in today's video I'm going to show you how I mod Xbox 360s that I get from customers. Specifically, this console came from my send-in service on eBay, so I'm going to leave that linked in the description below if you'd like your console modded. This customer has provided a power supply as well, so that might come in handy if I have any issues with mine. Here we go, so this is a Xbox 360 Slim. And if we take a look on the back here, we can see that it is a Trinity motherboard based on it saying 10.83 amps on the back of the console, and also the manufacturer date being 2011. So today I'm just going to go through basically how I mod the console, how I get them shipped out, just how things like this work, and hopefully, if you want your console doing, then you can go to the link in the description below and I can get it modded for you. Okay, so the first step when I mod a console is, of course, to get it disassembled. So what I like to use is my iFixit toolkit. So let me get that out. So this is the iFixit kit I use. I got it on Amazon for about £15, I think. NAND points here, gonna solder, so on there. This is basically just pre-tinning the points so that we can apply some solder, some wire, to them. This point always takes more heat as it's a ground point. And there we go, they're pre-tinned. A little bit more on that one, there we go. So now it's basically just matching up the wire colors to the diagram. So this is the bit which I need the diagram for, but it's quite simple now. I would say when you're modding your console or looking into modding your console, I think it's very easy to look at stuff like this and see kind of how simple the concept is, and then maybe think that you could easily mod your own console. But you gotta remember, this is about 5 years of experience. My first install was terrible. I'll put some pictures up if I can, otherwise I'll try and link them in the description at a later date. But yeah, they were awful. So definitely don't look at people like me or Mr. Mario or other YouTubers and see like how easily this all goes together, because when you have it in front of you and look at the size of them, it's a different story. I'm not saying you can't do it, I'm saying you need a lot of practice with soldering before you try a 360, otherwise you're going to end up with a dead console. Okay, so the last wire is the green one, which goes over here. There we go. That is all the NAND wires. Okay, so now we need to read the NAND using our computer. So what I'm doing here is just plugging the power supply into the wall. So just simply plugging the power supply into the wall and then plugging it into the console. But you can see that the front ring of light power button is not plugged in, because we do not want to turn the console on at this point. We simply just want to provide standby power. So I've got a USB-C cable plugged into my computer. That plugs into the X flasher, and then this end goes into the X flasher, and this is how we're going to read the NAND and connect it to our computer. So now with it all connected up to the computer, we're going to click this little question mark, and you can see here it says Jasper Trinity 16 megabyte, and it gives us a flash config, so that means we've done this correctly. Where it says read NANDs, we want to make sure this is on 2. It ranges from 1 to 4, but 2 is the perfect amount to compare them at the end and make sure they're the same, which indicates a good NAND read. So we're just going to click read NAND, and it's going to read 2 NANDs from the console and then compare them, and as long as it says NANDs are the same at the end, then that means we have a successful NAND read. Okay, so you can see here that it says NANDs are the same. So now what we can do is select glitch 2 RGH3, because that's the one I'm going to do on this console today. Then we can click create Xell and then write Xell, and that's going to write 50 blocks to the console. And this is the Linux loader, which is going to give us the CPU key we need to make the modified dashboard. So now we're going to unplug the NAND flasher from the console, unplug the power supply, and for this console we need to access the PLL point, which is under the heatsink. So we're going to have to remove that. So to remove the heatsink, we're going to flip the console over and get this X-clamp exposed. And I have this little tool here, it's called the X-clamp tool. And what it does is it just goes underneath these little forks here. So just like this. Some of them are a bit tight, so then you just rotate to the next one like this. Just going to have it in a little bit and then just pull up, and that's going to remove it. Some people like to do this with screwdrivers, but I've seen so many cases where people slip and damage traces or components. And assuming this is like your first console and you don't really have much soldering experience, trace repairs and all this SMD stuff is going to be very difficult to replace. So I personally would just wait, even if you're following along, just go and order yourself an X-clamp tool and just be patient, because otherwise you could end up with a dead console. And what you can do is just use 3 of these, and then the final one you can just unhook like this. Then you flip the console over and this will become undone just like this, and then you unplug the fan as well. Okay, so we're gonna have to clean up all this thermal paste and replace it, but I'm not gonna do that just yet. I'm going to make sure the console's all working first. So we're going to flip the console over, and all the soldering now is going to be on the back of the console. So the PLL point is here under the silk screen. We're going to have to scratch that off with a little knife. The other post point is here, post point is here, and then PLL is here. So we're going to have to run some wire. I like to use Kynar wire, so it's very thin. It's also known as like a wrapping wire. Here it is. So I ordered some purple wrapping wire. This is what I like to use, especially for the tiny PLL point. It just makes things a lot easier to solder. Now the angle on the camera is not going to be that good for this PLL point, mainly just because it's so small, so I wouldn't really be able to record it that well anyway. And as this is a customer's console, I'm not taking any risks on anything being damaged. I'm grabbing my X-Acto knives here. And then what I like to do for these is just get my phone and turn on the flashlight and find the point. So I'm going to turn the board like this and look for the little PLL point and scrape it away. This is really one of those points you have to take your time with, because there is a tiny little trace next to it, and if you damage that trace then the console is not going to boot. Okay, and that looks to be exposed. So now what I do is add a tiny bit of flux to it and just pre-tin it. So just feeding a tiny bit of solder just to get a nice ball on there, and that looks good. Okay, so the next point is post, which I like to do. So it's here if you count 1, 2, 3, and then it's this one. So this is quite a simple point, it's already exposed and everything. PLL is the only one which isn't exposed. So you can see here, just pre-tinning that. There we go. The next one is this pair here, and it's the one on the right. So we're going to solder that one as well. Just like that. And the final one is here, which is PLL. Bit of flux on that and solder it like that. Now what I'm going to do is get my wire, take some off and cut it. So I have a little wire stripper here. So just going to cut off some wire, expose the end just like this, and solder it onto this point. So you can see here what I'm doing is I'm putting the wire in and then I'm joining it up there just like that. Then the wire is routed to here, up here on the PLL point. Now for these consoles it's recommended to add an SMD resistor. So I'm going to grab one of those. So as this is a Trinity console, we want a 3k ohm resistor. So what I'm going to do is simply grab one of these off the reel and stick it there. And then I'm going to grab some tweezers. This is the hardest part of the install in my opinion. So on the PLL point I'm going to add a bit more flux and I'm going to add a bit more solder. Also keep a bit of solder on the end of my iron. And I'm going to get the resistor here, grab it and solder it to that point. So I'm going to try to show this. It's going to be difficult, but you can see that it's this one here. That is the resistor that I have soldered to the PLL point. Speaking of PCBs, did you know you can get your own printed with today's sponsor, PCBWay? That's right, with their quick order services, all you have to do is upload the Gerbers for any PCB board and they'll get them shipped to you quickly and affordably. I've used them for all of my hardware projects so far and the quality is fantastic, as is their service. They also offer board assembly, 3D printing and CNC, making them a one-stop shop for all of your prototyping and manufacturing needs. Go check them out at PCBWay.com. And then we're going to pre-tin up the other side of the resistor, just like that. And this wire that we soldered is going to connect to that other end of the resistor. So now here, soldering the wire to the end of the resistor. Just like that. So that is the soldered PLL point. The second one we need to solder is post, which is going to go from this point to this point. So I'm going to solder to here, this point. And then I'm going to have it loop round like this onto the post point. There we go. Okay, so I've just gone and got some little Q-tips and some isopropyl alcohol, and I need to clean up the flux off the motherboard. Over time the flux is corrosive to the motherboard, so it's important to clean it up after you've done an install. So you can see here, just getting some isopropyl on the board and just cleaning it up like this. Now, an important part of RGH installs is making sure that the wires don't come undone. Now, if you have a secure point and it's properly bound together, then you won't have this issue. But one thing you might have an issue with, even if your solder points are good, is that these wires here might get caught on something. And generally, just over the years of you having this console, them always moving around isn't going to do it much good. So I like to get some electrical tape. I have this blue one, so I cut off a strip of it, and I just get it like this, and I just stick it in between the wires like this, and that just makes sure that it doesn't like move around and get caught on anything. It's just an extra little bit of protection. Just a few little pieces of tape. Could do one here as well, and we'll definitely need to do one on this wire, so we can put one here like that, and we can also put one here just for good measure, right on the point. And there we go, that is the RGH3 installation done. Now the next part is booting into Xell to get our CPU key. Now the only problem is that the heatsink is removed, so we're going to have to clean up all this old thermal paste with some isopropyl alcohol and apply some new one onto the heatsink, because otherwise we're going to turn on the console and it's going to overheat, and we definitely don't want to do that. Alright, so that's all nice and cleaned up. Let's do the same with the heatsink. Okay, so there we go, that's all cleaned up. So now I'm going to grab my fresh thermal paste, which I have here. I use this thermal grease for consoles because it's cheap and seems to work nicely as well. So I'm just going to put like a X, might as well for Xbox, like that. I know thermal paste patterns are very controversial, so please don't tell me how wrong I did that in the comments. And then we can put this on again, making sure that the fan wire is pointing in the right direction. And then we can push it down like this and apply the heatsink. Sorry, apply the X clamp like this, and you should be able to just push them down, but sometimes if they're a bit stiff then you'll have to use the X clamp tool to kind of pull it back a little bit and push down as you do so. Just like that. Just like that. And now that is the heatsink applied with new thermal paste. So now we can plug the fan in again. So this console is going to run nice and cool now. Now we need to boot the console up, so I'm going to insert the ring of light board again, plug in power and HDMI. Let's see if it boots. And it does. Nice quick boot time. So now over here on the computer, you can see I have Xell Reloaded. So what I'm noting down here is the CPU key. That's kind of the main part that we need. I recommend just generally taking a picture of all of this. But you can see now this CPU key needs to go into this box here on JRunner. So I'm going to do that quickly. So you can see now over here on JRunner it said CPU key is correct. So now we can make the modified XeBuild dashboard and flash it to the console. To do that we're going to make sure glitch 2 is on with RGH3 enabled. Then we're going to click create XeBuild. Then we're going to turn off the console. Plug in our flasher to the console like we did before. And then we're going to click write NAND. And this is going to write updflash.bin to the console. Okay, so that image has been written to the console. It says write successful, time elapsed 37 seconds. So now we're going to unplug the NAND flasher and boot the console again. And it's going to boot up successfully like that. And now we have the Xbox 360 dashboard. So this means this console has been successfully RGH'd. So now we're going to unplug power and HDMI from the console, and we need to remove these NAND wires here. These are just temporary wires that we needed, so I'm going to turn my soldering iron on, add a tiny bit of flux just so they're removed nicely, and basically just heat up the wires and just pull them off. So just heating up the wire, and they're just going to fall off like this. And just run your iron over each point just to make sure none of them are bridging, and it's just a nice point. Just get them looking nice. And then once again we're going to have to get some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip. Just spray a little bit on the board and a little bit on the Q-tip, and just give it a little scrub to remove all of that flux residue. So the last part is simply just reassembling the console, adding all the plastic shields back on, screwing everything back together. So I'm going to do that process quickly, and then we can see the final result of the console. Console fully reassembled, looking all good. Let's give it a boot test into Xell. There we go. Boots into Xell nice and quick. And we'll give it a boot into the dashboard. And there we go. So this console is fully RGH now and ready to be sent back to the customer. The last thing I need to do before I send this out is just install a few homebrew apps, but I'm not going to record that just because it's not really that interesting. It's just copying files to a USB drive. Once again, thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. They allow me to make videos like this. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to subscribe and smash that like button, and I'll see you next time.